Beyonce has gone country. The vocalist dropped her new country western album, Cowboy Carter, last Friday. Some of the 27 songs on the record are called Texas Hold'em, Oh Louisiana, and Levi's Jeans. Beyonce first broke into the country genre of music about 7 years ago, but did not exactly receive the Southern hospitality in response. At the 2016 Country Music Awards, Beyonce performed with the Dixie Chicks, who are themselves controversial, where they sang her song Daddy Lessons off of her Lemonade album. This performance sparked an immediate backlash.
Nearing the release of Cowboy Carter, Beyonce cited an experience where she, quote, did not feel welcomed in the country genre. She wrote in an Instagram post last week, quote, this album has been over 5 years in the making. It was born out of an experience that I had years ago where I did not feel welcomed, and it was very clear that I wasn't. The criticisms I faced when I first entered this genre forced me to propel past the limitations that were put on me. She added, Act 2 is a result of challenging myself and taking my time to bend and blend genres together to create this body of work. So, why was the artist banished from Nashville, a bastion of white male singers? Singer-songwriter Jon Batiste, who collaborated with Beyonce on Cowboy Carter, applauded her for breaking down barriers across music genres. He posted on X, this is the moment, y'all, where we dismantle the genre machine.
All right, Briahna, what's going on here?
So the politics is really interesting. So back in 2016, she performed at the Country Music Awards with then known as the Dixie Chicks, now known as the Chicks. Now remember, the Chicks had been canceled years prior for making a statement at the Country Music Awards that was critical of the Iraq War and George Bush's handling of it.
That I definitely remember.
She was, again, they all were genuinely canceled back when cancellations were largely coming from the right and not criticized by kind of the free speech absolutist crowd. So when the Chicks teamed up with Beyonce at the CMAs, it was a great performance. It went really well in the room, but there was a great deal of online backlash from people who some were explicitly racist or racialized comments. Other people were focused on her attire, saying it was inappropriate. It was in line with what you would expect a woman to wear at a music award show. People were criticizing whether or not she had the right to dip her toe in the genre of country music, that it explicitly was not a genre for Black people, despite, of course, the Black roots of the genre, like most forms of American music, and on and on and on. So when Beyonce made this post accompanying this new country album, she made explicit what a lot of people had sort of gathered from the earlier controversy, which is that this album is a response in part to people telling her this was a genre she could not enter, this is a place she could not go. And one other aspect of the genre wars that are worth noting is that Beyonce has missed out on some pretty big award accolades, in part because the perception is that despite making extremely popular music and being one of the most popular artists, living or dead, in American history, she is often relegated to an R&B category, even when other singers who I would argue sing R&B, like Justin Timberlake, other white singers, get nominated in the pop category for singing R&B music. And so this is an interesting question of whether or not putting out a country album, if they're still going to try to characterize the music as different kinds of genres, even though she dons all this really clear iconography of a big hat and American flag and being on a white horse and dyeing her hair platinum, to really land the theme, as it were.
I see. Yeah, I would probably struggle to differentiate some of these categories as not a big music person, or frankly not a big. I'm not gonna say I'm not a Beyonce's great. I don't like especially or particularly listen to her music. Not knocking her at all. I loved Destiny's Child, obviously, back in the day. I think I was a big fan of theirs. That's just me liking the music of my childhood better than any other music available on the planet. I'm very against the idea of. I'm not against cultural appropriation. I'm against the idea of cultural appropriation. I think it's fine to appropriate culturally. I think some of the best things about American culture are, in fact, mixes of different people's traditions, and it gets smashed together, and it's fun, and that's fine, and I don't have any problem with people participating in music or art or food or fashion or any of that. Particularly when if it's done in a mocking way, then I still wouldn't say it's like wrong, but you can say, well, that was not a nice thing to do. But it's totally fine and in fact encouraged to borrow things from certain traditions, that no tradition belongs to a certain people. You know, these are, I don't believe in intellectual property. These are abstract concepts that everyone has the right to borrow whenever they
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting. One of the two articles that I wrote for Current Affairs back in like 2017 that really launched my journalism career was about cultural appropriation, and the point that I was making was largely what you said, but the concern is when, because of bias, some groups aren't able to be praised for or capitalize on their engagement with culture material as much as the others. So if one group of people, let's say, is being told you can't serve in the armed forces if you put your hair into braids, or you can't, it's considered to be unprofessional or whatever. Another group of people is getting, all of these ad deals and modeling contracts and stuff for engaging in the exact same behavior, then that's a problem. Or if, let's say, all the taco restaurants in your town end up being owned by white people because Hispanic people, Mexican people aren't able to get the same access to loans, then the issue here isn't really that a white person opens a taco restaurant. The issue is whether or not there are these other asymmetries that need to be addressed at the source. And that cultural appropriation is kind of a sideshow to the real problem. And so I agree with all of that. And it's also worth noting that to the extent that some people are accusing her of cultural appropriation right now, it is silly given the African-American roots of the genre, the way that American music has forever been a melange, the origin of the banjo as an African instrument. I mean, all of these things that people have pointed to that makes it also absurd. And also how respectful she is of really icons in the genre. Dolly Parton is featured on the album, and she does a cover of Jolene. Woody Nelson is on the album. And Miley Cyrus also has a duet with Beyonce on the album. She herself is a figure that's been criticized for cultural appropriation since she obviously came onto the scene as a Disney star, and then moved into kind of hip hop music. She had her phase where she was wearing long basketball jerseys and doing, features with rap artists. And then she took a hard pivot out of that led many people to ask, is she just kind of exploiting for coolness hip hop and kind of the dangerousness of the culture to get the Disney star, smell off of her before she moves into more quote unquote respectable forms of art. And so that was a whole discourse in and of itself. But of course, Miley Cyrus's, I know more about this than I realized. Miley Cyrus's godmother is Dolly Parton. Obviously, her father is Billy Ray Cyrus, another famous country star. So Miley kind of shifting back in that direction over the years does seem kind of natural and organic, and she's been really, I think, blossoming as an artist as she embraces that genre.
I was a big fan of the most recent album, made me a Miley Cyrus fan. That and her performance in that one episode of Black Mirror, that is one of my absolute favorite episodes. She's fantastic in that. You leave Miley alone, I say to all of the haters out there.
Yeah, and I do think that her duet with Beyonce is the best song on that album.
There you go. That does it for us for today. Tomorrow on Rising, we'll be back with another non-April Fool's Day edition of our show. Not that we tried to fool you very much, I don't think. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe so you never miss any of our content. And for those of you who like to listen while on the go, we're available anywhere you listen to podcasts. See you back here tomorrow.